Okay, so today we're going to be talking about the proficiency section of your latest test, which we're titling Actions and Motives. So, to get proficiency on this particular literature piece or test, you need to be able to understand and be able to identify the characters, actions, and motives of a piece of literature. And you're doing this by providing textual support and explanation. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this concept. This is just a refresher on what we will be talking about in class this week. So to start with, the characters' actions, what you're going to have to do is identify what the characters are doing in the story. So you're going to pick a quote from the story to show the characters actually doing something. So these actions that they're doing influence everything in the story, the plot, the direction the story is going, as well as the theme or the lesson that you're supposed to learn from the story. So as we read these stories, you're just going to be writing down different pieces or quotes from the story that show the characters doing something that has relevancy later on. So the motivation is the why behind what they're doing or why they did what they just did. Oftentimes, it's easier to collect the quotes as you read and then decide on the motivation after the end of the story. Because once you know the whole plot line of the story and understand the whole story, it's easier to understand the motivation behind what they're doing. So I'm going to use a Harry Potter example. Hopefully everybody has either read Harry Potter or has seen the movies so that this will kind of make sense to you. So basically in the 5th book of the Harry Potter series, Harry uses an unforgivable curse. That's his action. That's what he did in the story. And he does this because he's really consumed with grief at that point. So that's his motivation behind it. Now obviously all of the characters' actions have consequences in the story and will change the path the story is on. So actually later on in book 6, the fact that he did an unforgivable curse in the 5th book has a consequence later on. But for right now, we're just going to focus on the actions and motivation, not necessarily the consequences or what happens later on. I find that understanding actions and motives is easier in a short story or in the introduction of it by using a short story because you can read it in one sitting and really understand why the characters are doing what they're doing. So motivation is a little bit harder than actions, but together these two components or pieces are what you're going to need to be able to identify and explain in order to get at least proficient on this next series of tests. So the character's actions actually advance the plot of the story because the character decided to do something, the story now changes or develops in that certain way. So I'm going to use an example this time from the Hunger Games, and again, hoping that either everybody has read the book or seen the movie. If not, this should still kind of make sense to you. So in the movie The Hunger Games, or the story The Hunger Games, the younger sister Prim is chosen at the reaping. And now Katniss acts by volunteering herself as the tribute. This changes the plot of the story as we know it, and as the reader we realize that Katniss is going to have to go into the Hunger Games. So her action, or what she decided to do, changes the plot line of the story or advances the plot of the story. So because she volunteered as tribute instead of her sister, then we now know that the plot of the story is going to be about Katniss going into the Hunger Games. So, since we've already talked about actions and motives, can you think about what the motive is behind Katniss volunteering? So, why does she volunteer? Write that answer in your note. I'm going to talk about it in like a minute or two anyways, but try and see if you can guess and then check your answer later. So the characters' motives actually help promote the theme of the story. So this is going to be our first real introduction to theme this year. I know you've probably talked about it last year, and we're going to go over theme again and again this year as well. So thinking about the motives and how that promotes the theme of the story. And I think the trick with theme is that you've got to understand that there's no right or wrong in your answer, as long as you can support yourself with textual evidence or quotes from the story. So if you make a decision on what you think you're supposed to learn from the story, because that's what a theme is, right? What you're supposed to learn, the lesson you're supposed to get from the story. As soon as you pick this idea, like this is what I'm going to learn from this story, or this is what the author wanted me to know, you need to be able to support that. You can't just flat out say that the story is about learning to love someone for their unique individual characteristics. You can't just say that. You have to be able to say, I think this because of this, and then give evidence. So again, I'm going to go back to the Hunger Games again as an example. So if you said that the theme of the novel was to protect those you love at all cost, there's no right or wrong in that. And in fact, we could pick several themes from the story. I mean, you could talk about the consequence of, the government controlling all these outlying districts. That's fine too. That works as a theme too. But you have to be able to explain why you feel that way. So you could say, that Katniss volunteered at the Reaping in order to protect her younger sister from dying in the Hunger Games, right? That was her motivation behind volunteering. She didn't want her sister to have to go. So is that motivation, is that motive actually promoting the theme I've decided on in that you're going to protect your loved ones at all costs? I mean, the answer is, of course, yes. I mean, that definitely does give you an example of how that actually works. So you have to think about the characters are doing things within the story, and they're doing those things for a reason. So that's characters' actions and their motives. But then you have to think about what the characters are doing are going to change the plot and the way that the story is run, and their motivation behind what they're doing is going to affect the theme of the story you're supposed to learn. So that in a nutshell is what we're working on with this specific proficiency. We're going to read these short stories, we're going to identify the characters' actions and motives, and we're going to describe how those actions change the plot or develop the plot, and how those motives actually help us promote the theme that we've decided on. So the actions and motives part is the proficiency. Explaining the plot section is how you get mastery or a B, and then the theme section is how you're going to go for an A. So I think this can be done, and I'm hoping everybody tries for an A and goes all the way through. You need to remember the trick in being the theme or understanding the theme is there's no right or wrong answer as long as you can support yourself. Okay, so you're finished with tonight's homework. That, in a nutshell, was me going over this next test. Tomorrow I'm going to go a little bit more in depth on developing the plot or doing the mastery concept for this test. And I will also have a video for going for an A. So I really want everybody to try and get as far as they can in these proficiencies to bolster your grade or boost your grade up. So don't forget to go into your WISC tonight and do your summary and question and my expectations on both of those elements. The summary needs to be like at least 3 sentences with a topic and details supporting what we talked about today. And then the question should hopefully be a hot question, a higher order thinking question. Don't forget to use those starters. All right, I'll see you in class tomorrow.